If your feet or hands have started feeling like they're wearing an invisible glove, slightly numb, slightly tingly, not quite yours, try this for 10 seconds. Touch your thumb to your pinky finger on each hand. Notice how clearly you can feel that touch. Now press your big toe against the floor. Notice if that feels just as clear or slightly muffled. If one side felt duller than the other, your nervous system may already be sending you a signal most people wait years to mention to a doctor. Diane, 66, a retired bank teller, spent 4 decades counting bills by feel alone. Doctor, my fingers feel like they're wrapped in plastic. I almost dropped my coffee cup yesterday, and I didn't even feel it slipping. Most people assume tingling and numbness are just nerves wearing out with age. They're often not. My name is Dr. Kaiser, and this is The Health Signal. Stay with me, because you'll understand exactly what Diane's hands were trying to tell her. Diane assumed it was simply circulation, sitting too long at the bank counter, finally catching up with her. It's not just circulation. It's not simply age either. Take a breath with me for a second, because what I'm about to explain changes how you'll think about that tingling for good. Let me show you something fascinating. Think of each nerve in your hand or foot like a long electrical wire. Around that wire is a protective coating, similar to the rubber insulation around a household wire. When that coating is healthy, signals travel cleanly, fast, uninterrupted. When something damages that coating, the signal still travels, but it arrives distorted. Sometimes as tingling, sometimes as numbness. Doctors call this peripheral neuropathy, but you don't need to remember that term. What matters is this: the wire isn't necessarily broken. The coating needs attention. Why does this almost always start in the feet and only later reach the hands, if it reaches them at all? You might think it's just the weakest nerve. Not quite. The nerves running down to your feet are the longest in your entire body. Sometimes 3 feet of wire, end to end. The longer the wire, the more places along the way something can go wrong, and the more time it takes for damage to travel its full length before you feel it. That's why feet almost always go first and hands follow later, if they're affected at all. Diane's case was actually unusual. Her hands went first, which is one reason I looked closer instead of assuming it was simply circulation. Picture that protective coating like an insulation crew constantly repairing a long stretch of cable. That crew needs raw materials, bricks, and cement. One of the most important materials is vitamin B12. When B12 runs low, that repair crew runs out of supplies. The coating doesn't get maintained. Diane's blood test showed a significant B12 deficiency. She'd been on an acid reflux medication for 9 years, one of the most common, least discussed causes of low B12 in adults over 60, because that medication quietly reduces how much B12 your stomach can absorb from food. Corrected in time, many people improve substantially. Not always completely, but substantially. B12 isn't the most common cause behind this. It's actually the second most common. The most common, by a significant margin, is blood sugar that's been running quietly high for years, often before a formal diabetes diagnosis. Excess sugar damages small blood vessels feeding the nerve's coating. like sediment slowly clogging the tiny pipes that deliver supplies. This can begin years before fasting blood sugar rises high enough for a diabetes diagnosis. This is why tingling deserves its own conversation. A few medications are worth knowing about. Certain cholesterol meds, chemotherapy drugs, and a few antibiotics are associated with nerve side effects. If your tingling began within weeks of starting a new prescription, that timing is valuable information, not a reason to panic, and not a reason to stop the medication yourself. It's a reason to call your doctor and say exactly that. This started around the time I began this medication. Could the two be connected? Heavy alcohol use affects this too. Adults over 60, long-term reflux med users, vegetarians without B12, you are at higher risk. If you fall into more than one of these categories, that's not a diagnosis. It's a reason to ask more specific questions at your next appointment, instead of mentioning the tingling as an afterthought on your way out the door. I've been feeling unsteady lately, especially in the dark. Most people assume that's simply balance getting worse with age. Actually, it's often the same nerve signal problem, showing up in a different way. When the signal arrives distorted, your brain is essentially trying to balance using a blurry picture of the floor. Numbness is associated with higher falls. Picture walking confidently to your car in the dark without that small hesitation. That's genuinely within reach for most people who take this seriously now. I want to tell you about a second patient because his story shows what happens when these signals get dismissed for years. Robert, 74, a retired mailman, walked routes for 31 years, started noticing tingling in his feet around age 65, and assumed it was simply mailman's feet, worn out after decades on the job. He didn't mention it until he fell at 73. His foot didn't warn him in time. His blood work revealed diabetes he'd never been diagnosed with. Now, Helen, 70, a retired florist. Her tingling was only in 3 fingers of her right hand. Her B12 and blood sugar were normal. That specific pattern pointed toward a nerve being physically compressed at the wrist, made worse by decades of repetitive hand motion. So how do you tell the difference between Diane's pattern, Robert's pattern, and Helen's pattern before any blood test? The shape of the tingling itself is a meaningful clue. The shape is a clue. Both feet evenly, whole body cause. Specific fingers or one side, compressed nerve. Describe the shape to your doctor. Waiting for pain is a mistake. Numbness without pain deserves more attention because that's when balance risk is highest. Diane started B12 and improved. Helen used a wrist brace and recovered. Neither returned to 100%, but they stopped dropping things. That's the goal. Function. Here's exactly what to do this week. Ask your doctor for a blood panel checking B12, fasting blood glucose, or A1C, and thyroid function. While you're investigating, check your feet visually every evening for cuts or blisters. And wear supportive, well-fitted shoes indoors. Seek care more urgently if numbness comes on suddenly rather than gradually, if it's only on one side of your body, or if it comes with weakness, slurred speech, or facial drooping. Those combinations need same-day medical attention, not a scheduled appointment. Every signal has a story. The sooner you understand it, the more options you have. Your body is always communicating. You just have to know how to listen. Which felt clearer? Tell me in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the Health Signal. I'm Dr. Kaiser. Click the next video on the screen to go deeper.